On this episode, in Trump's first term, he did actually declassify JFK documents associated to the assassination.
Yeah, but wasn't like 99% of it redacted? This new administration that Trump is putting together, there's a lot of hope to be had in many different areas.
We're not just releasing these JFK files, we are declassifying everything that's associated to them.
Raise your glass to mysteries, cocktails and conspiracies. Dive into these histories, cocktails and conspiracies. Raise your glass to mysteries, cocktails and conspiracies. Uncover those anomalies, cocktails and conspiracies.
Raise your glass to mysteries. We're back with another episode of Cocktails and Conspiracies. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Shane Squarick here, as always, with my esteemed co-host, Mr. Phillips.
That was some-
Cheers, my friend.
That was some good ear-blowing shit, buddy.
You know, I actually didn't yell. I found out that if I don't yell, it still seems to come out really loud
quite
in
loud.
the playback. So as long as my mouth is close to the microphone, it seems to want to do its thing. Cheers. Welcome back to another episode of Cocktails
Cheers,
and
buddy.
Conspiracies. We are streaming live tonight to our friends on X. We might be trying that Rumble stream at some point, too. We'll see how that goes. We're not
Yeah.
streaming it live on
Get a
YouTube because we
multi-stream
never know
going.
what we're going to say. The YouTube
No, we
might
can't do
knock us
YouTube.
off right
We'll
out of the gate, so
get
we've got to be careful.
destroyed.
Yeah, we'd really have to overcensor.
You guys would
We
never
have to
see us
edit
again.
YouTube before it goes up there. In any case, the reason we're going live with this tonight versus just kind of pre-recording it and sending it out, which is what's going to happen with this anyway, is because tonight we're going to talk about something that's a little more timely than some of our other topics, which are a little more evergreen and don't really need to be live. The catalyst for this, honestly, we weren't even going to record tonight, Phillips, but
No, we weren't. And if we
Time
did, it
kinda
wasn't going
worked
to be
in our
about
favor.
this.
it definitely wasn't
We
going
had
to
a
be. Actually, I
completely
don't even
different
know.
episode planned.
Did we? I don't even know what the episode was supposed to be. I had no idea what our topic was.
Nevada Triangle. That's okay, because I didn't research it either.
That's right. That's right. I actually like that one. There's a lot of fun stuff in there. That one is coming. But for tonight, we have a group chat. We actually have tons of group chats on Signal. If any of you are out there want to join, just drop a comment and we'll try to connect with you. Or maybe just send us a DM on X. Probably safer that way, and we'll connect with you that way. But
what if we did like a almost like a fan or guest kind of group chat? That'd be fun.
we'll love it. Yeah. I mean, people do Discords out there all the time. I'm not a big Discord guy. I think that app sucks.
I've never used it in my life.
It's rough, man. It's like
Discord won't be sponsoring us anytime soon.
No, nor do I want to. I couldn't in good faith actually say oh yeah, let's sign up for Discord. But I'd love to get more people involved with our Signal chats. So we got a couple. One is more of just like a friends chat, and one's more of a conspiracy chat, and they sometimes bleed over because there's a lot of the same people. And in our friends chat tonight, we had a conversation striking up about literally what just dropped a couple days ago as we're recording this now, with Anna Paulina Luna coming on there with Chairman James Comer, and they have this task force on declassification of federal secrets. And that is quite literally what the name is. I don't know why they didn't come up with a better name, a fancier name, Mr. Phillips, but
Straight to the point.
that's what we're working with. Straight to the point. Not really straight to the point, man. It's a little long-winded if you ask me. I'm not going to lie.
Well, no, I mean it's just saying exactly what they're going to do. They're going to declassify federal secrets
That is indeed what
that
they're
shouldn't
going
be.
to do.
That likely should not
That
be secrets.
shouldn't be. Federal secrets should not be there. In any case, so I guess the crutch of this episode really stirs from our chat. And
Yeah.
one of our friends, Shawnee Boy out there, was asking, what are we
Did I
really
lose
going
you
to
or
get
did you lose
out of
me?
this? I don't know. I've got you loud and clear, boss.
That's no bueno if we're live. Oh, he's back.
We are live. Yep,
He's back
That's
or I'm
always
back.
you, man.
Walt's
It's always
back.
you, my man.
And you know what it is? It's the heater. It's got to be the heater.
I told you all the time, it's the heater.
All right, pick up, Shawnee boy.
So what I was saying before you decided to crank that heat and knock us,
cold
knock
down here,
your little
baby.
stream a little loopy there. Shawnee Boy was asking along the lines of, what do we really think that is going to be released, specifically to the JFK files, but I guess in the broader spectrum of this declassification task force?
Yeah.
What's really going to be released, and are we giving enough time to all these three-letter agencies to mask or accidentally lose something that they don't necessarily want us to see?
Right.
And so that's what sort of kicked off this kind of long-winded conversation, banter back and forth that went on for about an hour. And I had shot Tim a message after our schedule was cleared up and said, this would be a fun one to talk about, timely, obviously, but I think there's a lot of speculation here, just even pulling out what we talked about in the chat.
Yeah.
So I'm going to pose that exact question to you that Sean had asked. And I'm gonna pull it up right here. The direct quote was, "Ignorant comment incoming, but what exactly are people expecting to hear from this declassification task force?" Tim.
So I don't think things will be lost for sure, and I also think I think it's gonna be different for different topics, right? So, talking about the JFK thing before Trump got in first time around, he said he wanted to declassify it. Obviously, he didn't do it then. You then had 4 years of a disaster. Now Trump's back. The threat to any agency that wants to hide something has been out there for quite some time, that he was eventually going to declassify these things. And so they've had more than enough time to quote-unquote lose stuff, right? So I'm a little leery as to how much information we're going to get in regards to that specific topic now as we talk about other things, or as they start to declassify other things, right? Whether it be 9/11, I mean, you name it. Things that are and haven't been so much in the news, or I think because the JFK thing has really kind of been hyper-focused on the Trump administration, right? I think that there's a greater chance, if they act swiftly, that we get more information, because there's just not enough time for them to Band-Aid stuff, right? So I guess my long answer is I think it's really dependent upon what we're talking about here.
It's as vague an answer as you possibly could have given us there, Mr. Phillips.
It is. What do you think? Are you more pointed? Do you have a more pointed answer?
To a degree. So in Trump's first term, he did actually declassify JFK documents associated to the assassination.
Yeah,
I think it
wasn't
October
like
2017.
99% of it redacted?
Well, that's basically what it came down to. Is, I mean, there was quite literally files, and I had
Right.
pulled up a couple before. Maybe I'll pull them up again here now. That were just a complete block of text. Like it wasn't anything. It was a black scribble of magic marker, I guess, just taking out the whole piece of paper. It says, here's a memo. I don't even think it says JFK in there. I'm looking at one right now. It's super small though, so it's not even worth sharing. But that was it, and a little kooky, yeah. Kind of to be expected, though, right? Because why would we let everything go when the request that Trump made was kind of vague, right? I just want you to let these files out there, let the public see them.
Sure.
Excuse me, I've got this like lingering just cough that won't go
You know what
away.
helps that? When you drink. Drink.
Tom Butters, this is for you, man. This is what you got Tim started on. Now he's gonna be shouting to drink every second. I'm gonna run out of my drink before I even get to the show.
It's like, remember when we used to play Kings? 8 pick a date?
Yeah.
9 was the run?
Gosh.
Which one was drink? Wasn't there a drink one?
I think they all were drink, yeah.
Drinking was involved for all of them. Anyway, go ahead.
For all of them. So I think it sounds like the difference this time around is that we're not just releasing these JFK files, we are declassifying everything that's associated to them. Now, to your point, they've had 4 years. They've honestly had longer than that. They've had 60 years
right.
to bury whatever they wanted to bury. And that's always the I guess that's really where the precipice of this conversation came from in our group chat is, do people really expect one of these documents to be opened up and say, hey, BT dubs, it was us. It was the U.S. that did this.
Right.
Or,
Like,
hey,
will
by
there
the
be
way,
a smoking gun?
Right. Like, is there going to be physical evidence or a hard, decisive declaration that such and such a person is the one that did this to JFK or that was behind 9/11 or any conspiracy you have? I think the answer to that is no. And
I agree.
I don't think there was ever that answer. I don't think that answer was on a document and was filed away and it was blanked out all these years. I think that's crazy to think about.
I don't know.
You think there might have been a possibility that they wrote down, like, by the way, like Lee Harvey Oswald was actually working with, Johnny Brookside out there. You think there's something along the lines of that?
I think that if you're talking about... All right, so listen, we have to play pretend for a second because we don't actually know what the true story is, okay? So let's say that there was a 3-letter agency involved that was involved in the assassination of JFK, right? And let's say those it's probably a very small group of people within said 3-letter agency, right? Mm-hmm. These people, and we're talking, decades ago, right? This is in the 60s, right?
Yeah.
So literally, that's 40 plus 60 years ago, okay? There's no reason why, if you had a very small group of people, you wouldn't share written documents and information about that. I think that it's plausible that information does actually exist. Or at least existed at one point in time. Does it still exist? I don't know. That remains to be seen. But I think somebody could have been stupid enough to actually put that down on a piece of paper.
Okay, that's interesting.
I think it's possible.
I've sort of taken the opposite side, is that I think if there's only 3 people involved, they wouldn't be sharing memos about that on any sort of official government documentation or something that could be kind of tracked and cataloged at any point.
But it's so hard to pull off. Like, that would have been an intricate thing to pull off.
Right, but why are you writing official documentation on that? I'm not saying that there wasn't some sort of communication, but we're talking communication, and we're talking communication that's now been indexed, dumped in a classified folder, and it sits there. Like, I think there's the one thing about all of this documentation, right, is when there's a file that exists that's classified, it's not like there's just like this robot that decides if you can see it or not. There are people that have access to that classified information. When you submit a FOIA request, right, and you're trying to get information out of the government, there's somebody that's going to review that, and they're going to check it for classified information. They're going to blank out what they think might be classified or not classified and release it from there, which is why sometimes you get multiple people might submit a FOIA and sometimes get different responses, and a little more leaks out of it, because sometimes things change all the time. There is some human error element in that. And I think when you consider that, then you have to realize the fact that, well, if somebody's looking at these documents and making some sort of a determination on classification, it means they know what's in there.
Sure.
Now, I'm not saying that there's a vast amount of people that know what's in there, but over 60 years, more than one person knows, more than 3 people. There's a series of people that went through it. And again, maybe that's now under more lock and key over the years, and the further out you get it, or the higher the classification is. I know people are going to write in the comments, blah, 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 give us the full price. I get it. There's different degrees of it, but
sure.
As with anything, if you're in there and you've got any degree of security clearance, I feel like you could probably snoop around just enough and figure it out. That's why I don't think you've got that smoking gun per se. What I think you actually might have is testimonies. I think you might have eyewitness accounts. I think you might have evidence, autopsy reports. And I think all of those things will paint a different picture than what the official narrative is. And one of the examples we had used, or I guess I had used in that chat, which I know you'll love, is the discussion about MK Ultra. Is there was these programs that were going on, and they took the forms of multiple names throughout the years.
Sure, it was Artichoke before it was Ultra.
Yeah, and it was a couple other ones in there too. You used to have them down pat too. Even
I used
Artichoke.
to. We've talked about.
Are you sure it was Artichoke and not something else?
It was definitely Artichoke because I kept fucking it up and calling it something else.
Okay. So you've got this. And so like, as people started to get turned on to one idea, or, rumors started to leak out about one, they just changed the name and filed it under something else. That way, if you were to start submitting FOIA requests or anything, well, Artichoke's not there anymore. Now it's called something else. That's the other. Well, now it's called MK Ultra, and like that's why the names are so dramatically different. Is it made it harder to kind of follow that along. But if you get all the documentation, which as would later become released, you can start to piece these programs together. I'm like, whoa, this is that, and this is that, and well, they were doing mind control experiments, and they were trying it using drugs, and they were trying it using music and television and imagery. They were trying it using advertising. Like, they were trying all these different ways to figure out how to control people's minds. That's what I think you're going to find in something like the JFK Files. Is now you're going to have people, and I emphasize this by saying Anna Paulina Luna during her press conference specifically called for investigative journalists to step forward and said, this isn't going to be a government only thing. Once we get all these files, we want you to look through them and help us put the pieces together. So that's what sort of pushes me down that path as well, is I think we're just going to have to put pieces together. And I think we're going to be in the same boat in a way where, no, like, we're not going to have a definitive answer because the people that were probably behind it are never going to be on record saying it. However, I think there'll be enough testimony that's been buried that will come to light, and we can definitively say, yes, it wasn't one person. It was more than one. There's indeed a conspiracy here.
Right.
Who those other people are may still be lost to history, but at least we'll know definitively we're not all crazy. It's not just one guy.
Yeah, and I think to your point, especially when we talk about JFK, right, that's probably the most studied assassination in history. It's one of the most studied events in human history. I think that once we get more information, as you just alluded to, right, eyewitness accounts, different evidence, when you piece that together with what other people have already done in terms of investigation, you're going to be able to link a lot of things together. You're going to be able to draw parallels. And I think eventually, because of that, we're going to get an answer. The answer may not simply be in the declassification of the documents, right? Like, on day one when they're declassified, we may not have that answer right then and there. But once those investigative journalists have the opportunity to mull it over and really go through it, I think eventually we're gonna come to a pretty certain degree of truthfulness here that we can say this is more than likely what happened. Would you agree?
Yeah. I think you nailed it with that. This is going to be the Twitter files. It's going to be the Twitter files with U.S. government documents. We're already seeing it unravel that way with Elon Musk, and everyone's going up in arms because Elon's running around and he's exposing all this fraudulent activity that we're spending, and they're losing their minds over it. The fact that we're spending, but they're not losing their minds over the fact that we're being fraudulent. They're losing their minds over the fact that Elon is the one discovering it. Like, are you guys out of your freaking mind?
But here's the thing.
It's just
here's the thing with that, and I think I might have mentioned this the other night when we were pubbing. I don't think that most normal people, even people that consider themselves to be on the left, I don't think most Americans aren't really truly losing their minds over it. I think the deep state, I think the far left are losing their minds over it because they know the jig is up, right? They know that it's all transparent now when everybody else could see it, and the media is the one who's really losing their minds, right? We feel like people are losing their minds because that's what we see on TV. That's what we see posted by certain people online, right? I think if you ask the average American, most of them, regardless of what part of the aisle they sit on, most of them are probably like, yeah, that's a good thing. We don't want corruption within our government. I think most normal people would agree with that. And if not, you're a fucking lunatic.
I think you've lost a lot of your liberal friends and colleagues after the 2020 ordeals.
Oh, I certainly
because I am very much seeing people losing their mind over.
I've seen some.
Elon. Some. I'm seeing way more than some, and some of the usual suspects that you and I would know. But I mean, I'm seeing people that are. One person in specific comes to mind. I'm not going to put this person on blast on here, but you would know who.
You can tell me.
I'll tell you that offline. Yeah. This person is usually very level-headed, very different opinions from me on both sides of the aisle, but always very level-headed in their approach and is absolutely going on a tear. I'm talking post after post after post, and I've commented on a few of them. And there's a lot of like subtle like jabs and shots saying like, oh, all these idiot Trumpers or these morons or these like, not necessarily just to me, but like knowing that I'm watching it. But there's lots of people doing this, and I'm seeing, and I saw somebody the other day like losing their mind about it secondhand because I'm not connected with that person on social media anymore. But like they just went off. They just went absolutely. Who thought this was a good idea? I'd love to know what do you guys think? Do you think Elon Musk, a man who's got like what has he got, $40 billion, $400 billion? Yeah, $400 billion. Yeah, $400 billion. You think he's stealing money from you? He's already got more money than he knows what to do with, and he just he doesn't even use it for anything. He sold everything he owns. He lives quite literally lives in a box.
He wildly overpaid for Twitter. Wildly overpaid.
Oh my god! Right. Intentionally.
I mean, that's the definition. It's the definition of fuck you money. Here's my thing,
Exactly.
though, right? Listen, are there normal people out there freaking out? 100%. I'm not saying that nobody is. I think it's two
I think there's
things.
more than you think there is.
And listen, there certainly can be, but I think it's two things. I still feel like it's a very loud minority of people. That's number one. And number two, those people are just, they're captured, they're brainwashed. It's one of two things. They genuinely believe it because they've been fed that narrative for so long, right? I mean, we're talking about over a decade at this point that they've been fed Orange Man bad, everybody else good, right? And anybody associated with Orange Man is also bad. So they've been fed that narrative for over a decade, right? So some of them are literally brainwashed. And I think a good majority of the others who display in public, whether, and by public I mean social media, that they feel that way, are people who just don't want to admit that they were wrong to begin with, right? Like, people have egos. It's tough for people to say, like, oh yeah, I fucked up, I was wrong, you were right. And some people just continue to ride that wave, man. And they'll do it for as long as they need to do it because it's tough to just swallow it and just take your lumps. So I do genuinely believe that it's a very loud minority of people. Most people, I mean, just look at the fucking election map. Most people agree with what's happening.
I also find it funny / ironic to watch people like come back and try to quote news outlets who are quite literally on the USAID donor list, where, you know, the last regime was sitting there and funding these newspapers, and they're the ones producing all these reports, blah, blah, blah. And that's what's being sourced. So it's kind of funny to look at that. But
it is, I agree.
I want to bring it back to this new task force, right? So we kind of went off a little bit there, but I think that ties us in really well. We're doing the weave, the old classic Trump weave here. So as we weave it back, outside of JFK, that's really just the bread and butter, because, you know, that's the one that's kind of sat amongst, I think, the top of mind for most Americans at this point for most of their lives. Because as we've said before on this show, everything starts and ends with JFK, right? If you can you can definitively prove that the U.S. had some sort of a hand or aforementioned knowledge of this assassination of JFK, then all of a sudden there's a domino effect. And everything else that's come subsequently, now you can call into question, for better or for worse. So I think that's why that kind of sits in the top of people's minds. But the other big one is the Epstein list. And that one was sort of left off the radar for a while. And then just recently, I'm starting to see that pop up a little bit more as this announcement came to fruition. Because that was the first thing people said is, well, Trump comes in, he said he's going to release the JFK files, the RFK files, the Martin Luther King files, which we should go back to that one because that one was an interesting one to me.
Yep.
But everyone kept, I can't believe you wouldn't do the Epstein, blah, blah, blah. Well, now that's out there as well. And that was, again, Representative Anna Paulina Luna, or I guess Congresswoman, Representative Anna Paulina Luna, she, outright said that during her press conference that was on the docket there.
We need a nickname for her, by the
Cash
way.
Patel has been it.
We need a nickname. Her name's too long. I need a nickname.
Anna Paulina Luna doesn't work?
I gotta come up with
I guess you can
something
call
else.
her Anna Luna, or just call her Luna.
I guess.
Representative Luna. Rep Luna. I don't know.
You know me. I like nicknames. APL. I don't like it. That's like the first one that comes to mind. It just doesn't. I'll come up with something.
APL works.
I'll figure
APL
something
works.
else
I
out.
like
We'll go
it.
with APL for tonight.
APL from FL. Cash Patel, who is, I guess, pegged to kind of go into the FBI and take over there, has outright said to day one, first thing I'm doing, I'm walking into the building, I'm getting that list, and I'm releasing it out to the public. That's one where I think we're going to start to run into a little bit of trouble. I don't know that we're seeing an actual list out of that one. You know what I'm saying with that?
Yeah. I think. What do you think people want more? Do you think people want JFK, or do you think people want that list?
I think people want Epstein. I think people want Epstein because Epstein's very new.
It's more recent.
And it's very relevant.
Right. It's more relevant. It's more new. I would agree with you. No, I don't think we're actually going to get a list, unfortunately. And you know what it is? Look, this new administration that Trump is putting together, there's a lot of hope to be had in many different areas, right? Whether you want to talk about this task force or there's a million other things, right? But it's still the U.S. government, and the U.S. government has lied to us for a really, really, really long time. And they have ways to circumvent the truth from coming out, regardless of who's trying to divulge that truth. Look at JFK. So, Well, it's. I'm not saying that they don't have. I'm not saying that Patel doesn't have the intentions or APL have the intentions to release the names that are on the Epstein list. I just don't know if it's actually going to happen. I don't know if they'll let that happen.
Yeah, and I want to add to that too, is like that's another one where I don't know that there's just like a real list that sits out there. And we always talk about like the flight logs and stuff you always hear.
Yeah.
I suspect what you're going to end up seeing is a half-assed flight log of, like maybe like initials or something like that. People are going to have to just guess and check on what that could be. Or you'll see a bunch of names that you've literally never heard of, and they're just going to be kind of washed away type stuff.
But you're going to
I
tell
don't
me
think
they
you're going
don't
to see,
know?
here's all of Epstein's. I'm not saying
They
don't
know, dude. They know.
I'm not saying they don't know, but I think it's also going to be another piece. Like Epstein was going through and effectively blackmailing people as he brought them to this island for one way or another. I don't know that he really kept like a perfectly tidy black book with everybody's name and the information there. I mean, like this is the kind of stuff you see in like movies, right? Like where, oh yeah, the supervillain just happens to tell the hero his entire plan,
Right.
and then he gets captured. I don't know that it's that clean and tidy. I think you could put a lot of pieces together, and I think there is probably some degree of evidence in there, just like the Diddy tapes. I feel like a lot of that's been washed, and I feel like a lot of it's going to be used as leverage. You've got a lot of power over people now, and I think we've already seen some of that power taking shape between the Diddy tapes and the Epstein stuff. People are going to make deals, and we saw a lot of people come out during the last election and make very bold endorsements for some candidates that just seemed very out of character and very unsincere.
Yeah.
I don't doubt that there's some degree of blackmail going on with that. I don't think that, as much as I love the guy, the Trump administration, I don't think that him or maybe some of the people that work with him are against utilizing some of that for their own sake and maybe striking a name off that list or only partially releasing it just to kind of keep some protections in place.
No, it's a valid point. That's a very valid point, right? Look, this administration still has an agenda, right? And the entire, agenda doesn't revolve around this task force. And so if they could accomplish bigger things by negotiations and taking a few names off of a list, I wouldn't put it past them, right? Now, whether that's a negative or a positive, that remains to be seen. We'll see what happens after the next 4 years, occurs and what happens. But I think it's a really valid point.
I also think information can be kind of dumped strategically. And for that, I look back at like the whole UFO disclosure thing that's been going on.
Yeah.
We've had a couple hearings now. And for those interested in this topic, you've probably dove into it 100 times by now. You've seen all the hearings, all the documentaries. We've talked about it a couple times here. There's not a whole lot out there. It's effectively barren at this point. And even in those hearings, like it's not like we really got much out of them. Some vague descriptions by using non-human intelligence, some suggestions that, we can only talk about this information in a secure skiff. I'm not at leisure to talk about this. A lot of it just seems like fluff, especially after Jeremy Corbell just came out with a documentary that built up to that last press conference that they had. And I guess like he's the one that sort of orchestrated some of the people that went in there. And the whole thing was built about a quote, which you knew he had bottled up the whole time. And it was like the teaser for it, where he walks out of the courtroom, or he walks out of this House floor, wherever it was, House or Senate floor, and he's like, "The American people the American government just lied to the people," or something like that. And that was like the big the soundbite.
Right.
And as I watched it, and they played the shit out of that soundbite, by the time I got to it, really the reason he did that is because they didn't mention his name in the briefings as like the person that like kind of orchestrated this stuff, and he lost his mind about that. And as I
know
watched
you're very
that,
critical of our boy Jeremy Corbell.
Yeah. I am, because I feel like it's clout chasing a lot, and I feel like it's the same thing with everybody, right? Like you have these press conferences, or you have somebody like him who has all this information, and I know it's coming, and they just give you like nuggets, and they give you just enough, and they tease it, and they say it's coming, but they give you like vague things, and they give you like 3 or 4 options, right? So that way, as long as one hits, they can say, "I told you, but I also said this." You see this a lot. Again, everyone knows I'm a huge pro wrestling fan. You see this a lot in pro wrestling dirt sheets, where it's like such and such is coming. Rumor mills, like sports have the same thing, right? Dirt sheets, reporters, rumor mill, such and such a player. I'll use an NFL thing.
Sure.
Aaron Rodgers is leaving the Jets. Aaron Rodgers might also stay on the Jets.
Sure.
If this happened. Well, yeah, of course he's either going to leave or stay on it. You got a 50-50 shot of one of the other ones coming, right? Like something is going to happen. But if you report both of them, then you can always go back and say it.
Right.
And then if you're wrong, you can always say, well, things change anytime. And that's why I say that the wrestling dirt sheets is, it happens infinitely on there because obviously wrestling's pre-scripted.
Sure.
And so you'll have, for a while, there's people leaking out scripts, right? And they would get paid by these dirt sheet writers so they can break the news. And so what they did to weed them out is the officers, the top writers, would feed out bullshit stories and leak them out, figure out who the leak was, and can them, because sometimes it was wrestlers, right? So what they would do is they would say, oh, well, you know, this was supposed to, because some of these people are charging you money for this information.
Sure.
This was supposed to happen, but, you know, they tore up the script last minute and they changed it. Well, no, that's not true at all. They caught you. They bullshit you to get you.
Right.
I feel like that's what happens too on the UFO side, where you're getting these people that probably did get a good tip or two and unleashed it. The Tic Tac video is a great example of that. But now you need to kind of stay relevant, right? How do you do that if you're not getting more information? You say that you are,
sure,
and you give absolutely no information. Oh my God, if you guys just knew what I saw, it's going to blow your mind. We're not alone. It's the craziest thing, but I can't talk about it. I just can't say, because it's going to put everybody at risk. It's going to put my own life at risk. It's going to put my sources. Well, no, it's not. Like, yeah, I get that certain information is privy, right? And you'll get that. But there has to come a point where, like, if there's this many people that want to whistleblow, just leak it.
Right.
What are they going to go around executing all these people one after another? No, of course not. Like, and the more people gatekeep that information, the more I think they're full of it, right? And so that's why I use that as the example, is like, you're going through these motions, and we keep saying that we know the U.S. government's involved. We know the U.S. government's involved. We've got Congress sitting there who should have all this power. March into these organizations, march into these army bases. You take the security clearances of whoever's in charge if they don't show you what you want to see. The problem is solved. There is the information. The fact that that doesn't happen, Tim, is what I guess puts me on the pessimistic side of this new task force. Is I think we're going to be fed just enough juice to get everybody excited, just like we got the JFK Files a couple years ago.
Right.
There was a couple nuggets in there that were like, all right, this is really cool, this is great. Just like with the alien stuff, non-human intelligence, biologics, carefully selected words to make people think that, you know, things are going wacky here. It's just enough to get people excited about it and to get them off your back. And then the really juicy stuff you're never going to hear about.
Well, look, I just like you just mentioned, that scenario with people who are in this world, people who are making documentaries and writing, specifically as it pertains to UAPs. Just as you had mentioned, they might leak out some bullshit and some real shit. And anybody who's listened to Joe Rogan has heard this before, but I think it bears repeating because I 100% agree with it. I think that the U.S. government leaks a lot of bullshit too, right? Because let's think about it for a second. If we really had the power, well, the power's not the right word, but if we had the technology, let's say we actually did reverse engineer some technology that was of non-human intelligence origin, right? And you really didn't want anybody to know about it. What's the best way to get people off your back is to leak a little bit of truth, but then leak a whole load of bullshit. Because what happens when you leak a whole load of bullshit, it discredits all of it, right?
Yep.
Now, anybody from the outside looking in goes, what are you, fucking nuts? You believe any of that? Look, you're going to tell me that, oh yeah, not only do aliens exist, but they're actually Bigfoot. It's that Bigfoot is actually an alien, and he's the one that's piloting the craft, right? And so I know I'm using a very, a wacky thing, but that's my point, right? Like, this is what they do, right? So I think that there's also a real possibility that a lot of this information that is bullshit is also leaked out from the government as well. Because what better way to do it than to just make people think that who's ever leaking this information is nuts?
There's there's a huge community of people that agree with that, Tim, like disinformation agents, right? Like it's known that this happens. Two truths and a lie. There's games built after it. The Traders is built after that. Actually, you know what? I always said I wanted to segue into that, and this is the perfect time to do that.
Do it up, baby.
There's the hit new TV show out there is called Traders. It's the #1 watched non-scripted reality show in the world.
You're
right
such
now.
a TV guy. You love
Such a
TV.
guy. Love it. Love it. Love it. So the premise of the show is that you've got, I don't know, call it 16 people that are put up in a mansion, kind of like the game Clue, where somebody dies and you have to try to figure out who it is. In the beginning of the game, a couple people are picked as these traitors.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, trying to clear my throat. So they're picked as these traitors. It's completely anonymous. You're not supposed to tell. Those traitors meet every night, and they elect somebody that they're going to kill from the house, kill them off, right? The next day, they play games and stuff like that, but every night they have a round table with everybody in the house, and they have to decide who they think is a traitor and vote them off. So they might vote off.
It's like that
faithful,
game,
right?
It's like that game those kids were playing. What was that fucking game with the weird little people?
The
What was
wolf
that thing
game.
called? No, it wasn't Wolf.
There's an old English game that used to be in the UK where it was called like the Wolf in Sheep's Clothing. I don't know, something like that. But it was the same basic premise. I don't know what game you're talking about, but the whole premise, based off this old English game, is that you have 16 people in the house, right? Only 2 to 3, depending on how many traitors there are at that point in the season, know the truth, and they can cause so much chaos. And it's such a fascinating psychological effect because people say this all the time. How is it possible that these conspiracies can be true? Because if you have a little bit of information, like somebody's always going to know the truth. And it's funny because when you watch the show, somebody always figures out who the traitors are. And they either get voted off by their own faithfuls or the traitors kill them.
Right.
And sometimes they, playing the game becomes strategy and whatnot. And so the reason I wanted to bring this in is because it's so applicable here is the knowledge of a small few will always outweigh the lack of knowledge of a vast majority because people turn against each other all the time.
Sure.
Exactly what you just said. 2 truths and a lie, right? All it takes is that lie to discredit everything that's being said. And it's so fascinating because this past season on the Traitors, there's this one super reality star. His name's Boston Rob. He's been on Survivor multiple times, a bunch of other shows. In any case, like his whole thing when he was on all these reality shows is like he built himself up and he basically betrayed the people next to him. So everybody already looked at him as a villain. And he was able to take out like 4 or 5 people. And every week somebody said he's got to be a traitor. But he talked him out of it because he picked one thing that like seemed true but wasn't. And he just buried that person, and nobody knew what to do because they just panicked, and the people started going crazy, and they just didn't look at the evidence. I think that is exactly what we'll end up getting across the board with this task force because, like you said, this is what we get anyway.
Right.
You get 2 truths, and then you get the lie, and the lie always discredits everything. And it's what we talk about with conspiracies.
I was going to say,
time.
you've mentioned it a million times, right? All it takes is
1,000 times.
one little hole that you could poke in a theory, and all of a sudden that whole theory's blown up.
If you tell people this is the truth can have 99% holes in it, and they buy it.
Right.
But if you tell people this is the conspiracy, even if it's 99% true,
Right.
that one hole discredits the whole thing.
You're right.
All the time. It's why when we talk to people about this stuff and we plead out to the internet when they're trying to make their case for whatever the conspiracy is, don't worry about everything. Don't worry about all the details. Just focus on one specific thing and prove that true.
Yep.
Don't patch in all the rest of the details. I suspect that's what's going to end up happening because that's what happens with the UFO stuff already. That's what's happened with everything else. That's what happened with MK Ultra back in the day.
Yeah.
And I suspect, again, the JFK thing, Trump said something really interesting that he didn't want to, he didn't want to, I guess, release the JFK files because some of the players were still alive.
Yes,
or would impact
this
some
is
of the people
during
there.
his first administration, yes.
Well, yes, he said this after his first administration, but
Right.
more
Alluding to
recently,
why
when you
he
said
didn't
you were
do it,
going to,
yes.
right, you were going to declassify it all, you didn't. Why are we to believe you this time?
Right.
And that seemingly has changed. And so I think there's, especially with RFK Jr. in the fold now, I think there's a debt that he owes him, RFK, because I think RFK really did help put him over the top, that he's going to help him figure out what happened to RFK's father.
Well, dude, after he
And I
signed
think
that order, he said something pertaining to the fact of like give this pen to RFK Jr.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. He kept the pen. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was a really cool gesture.
That was cool. By the way,
I think
the game I was thinking of was called Among Us. Do you know that game? That video game that all the kids were playing a few
know
years ago?
of the game, yeah.
That's what I was
I've
thinking
never
of.
played it, but
I
I
haven't
know
played
of the
it either.
game.
My
I'll have to
kids
check
used
it
to
out.
play it.
I actually have it for my kids, but because I got it in a bundle of games, and it was a little too old for them, so I'll figure that out later. But where was I going? Oh, so I think he owes that debt of gratitude. He's going to pay that off.
Right.
I think with the JFK stuff, it's far enough in the past where people might forgive it to a degree because, again, it's one of those things where, like, we've talked about it before in one of our other episodes. It feels so distant. I think it was our 9/11 episode, honestly.
Probably.
That it doesn't matter so much to people our age anymore. Crazy if it happens. We have short memories, right?
Yeah.
Move on to the next thing.
I don't know, though, dude. I think that if... And listen, it all depends on what the true story is, right? So, you know, I've had the thought or the mindset for a long time that the U.S. government was involved, right?
Yeah.
If that's the case, and that comes out, dude, that fucking changes everything. That changes everything. That's a big deal, regardless of how long ago it was, right? Because, I mean, look, the old adage is the last true president that we had was JFK. Everybody else after that has been a puppet, right? And if we really truly did, if a faction of the U.S. government did assassinate a sitting president, I mean, Jesus Christ, dude, that's it's unthinkable, right? And I know that sounds stupid to say it's unthinkable because it's exactly what we're thinking, but to really know 100% for certain that happened, that's fucking nuts.
Yeah.
That's absolutely nuts.
Yes, I'm in agreement with you, but we've forgave and forgotten before on other things, right? Like, I mean, they outright told us that they were capturing soldiers and running inhumane tests on them and brainwashing them and mind controlling. They outright told us they were conducting experiments on the people through advertising manipulation. They outright told us that, you know, cigarettes were great to smoke and pounding bags of sugar is healthy for you, that putting cocaine in Coca-Cola cans, like, that's okay. Like, these were healthy things that we were told at some point.
We've been told many times that things are safe and effective.
Right. And we've been told many times that, okay, well, we did this, but we're not doing it anymore. I don't think you're going to see anybody come out of the gate and say it was the U.S. I think there's going to be knowledge that we were aware of certain aspects of it.
Right.
And I think there might be some people that they're going to pin off as saying that these were rogue actors and a very small subset of people that were servicing some other decree, what have you, some other group, clandestine organization. And I think it'll be just enough where, yes, people get aggravated, but again, who's the guy letting it all out right now, right?
Yeah.
There's a difference between Trump doing this, or let's say if Biden did this, right? We're both big Trump people, obviously. I mean, I'm wearing the friggin' hat right now, but you're going to look at him like, all right, well, he's coming in here to shake up the establishment right now. So this is why it's exposing it, which is going to create, now it's strategic too. It's going to create this, like, almost this external awareness, like, well, he's exposing them, so he's not going to do it.
Sure.
Which I agree.
Which we
I
hope.
don't think he's that type of person.
Right.
However, he's only here for 4 years.
Right.
That doesn't mean that the next guy doesn't, or the guy after that, or the guy after that. You know, like, things can change in a swift. And like you alluded to before, as soon as you start to shake up the establishment, crazy shit happens. He's already had the attempts on him. I don't know that continues. I think if the walls come crashing down, so be it. I just think they're going to start to pick off all the people that are around, maybe around him, and what they're going to end up doing is getting under their skin, getting in their heads, and maybe positioning them to come in as the next savior.
Right.
But then to kind of maybe work in that.
Right, to compromise
one world
them.
government again.
Exactly. And
compromise
just to get
them,
them
yeah,
back on the side of the machine, right? And that's kind of, I think, look, as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of hope with this administration. We're it's literally in its infancy right now.
Yes.
You know, my fear is is it going to go as well as I hope it's going to go? And then also, to your point, it's only 4 years. So, you know,
what happens next.
What happens next, right? So, like, what impact... And look, not that we want to spend this entire episode talking about politics, and I don't think we intended to at all. I just think a lot of it is connected.
Well, it's kind of ties in together with the task force.
Right,
That's what it is.
It's very connected. But, you know, look, what we know now, right, just in what Doge has released in regards to U.S. aid, has already unveiled the fact that for decades, we've been being robbed blind. The American people have been robbed blind, right?
Yep.
It's all backdoor kickbacks is all it is at the end of the day. You know, so I don't know. It's not, I guess my point, the reason why I bring that up, I don't know if it's as easy to just completely abolish that in 4 years in one fell swoop. I don't think it's as simple and cut and dry as that.
Mm-hmm. What would you say is the secret that you're most eager to find out from this new task force, this declassification task force? If you could pick one thing, or maybe two things, I'll leave that up to you.
I would love the UAP. I hate the fucking word UAP. I would love UFOs.
I'm good with UFO.
Let's just stick with UFO. Fuck UAP.
I want to pull that out though, because there's a whole separate group that are going after the whole UFO thing right now,
right?
And alien life. I love that too, but there's so much going on with that. I feel like this task force. I mean, Luna even said it, like it's bigger than that.
Sure.
Which I guess in a degree it is, but I feel like they're intentionally keeping them separate. There's going to be crossover. They can potentially keep them separate. Beyond the UFO situation, is there anything else that, like, you're just itching to find out?
Yeah, if I had to pick one, like if you came to me and said, hey, you could only pick one thing and get the full truth on that, for me it would be 9/11.
Yeah.
For me it would be 9/11, okay. Right? Because, and look, we've covered 9/11 pretty extensively.
Yeah.
We've had multiple guests talking about multiple different factors of 9/11, not just talking about the World Trade Center, right? So for me it would be 9/11 because it impacted my life as it did impact yours, right? I mean, we were young teenagers at the time. We've alluded to the fact many times over that the official narrative just never sat right with us, still doesn't sit right with me today. And if I had to pick one thing, that would be it. I want to know everything there is to know about 9/11.
You kind of stole my thunder there, because that was exactly where I was going to go with it too. I think that's...
Well, you could add some color.
Yeah, no. I mean that to me is really, for all the reasons you said, probably unequivocally one of the biggest moments in our lives, because of the ripple effects that it had beyond that.
Right.
Yeah, man. I think there's a lot that could come out on that would have bigger ramifications than the JFK stuff, which I think will align very much.
Well, look at the Patriot Act. Look at the fucking Patriot Act that occurred right after 9/11, right? So not only do you have the worst terrorist attack that's ever occurred on U.S. soil, okay, that personally affected you and I both in a very, very close manner, an extreme loss of life, but then you have the Patriot Act that's passed right after 9/11 that allowed the U.S. government to effectively spy on its own fucking citizens. I mean, are you kidding me? I mean, that changed the fucking world forever. That changed the U.S. forever. So, to your point, the ramifications that day had, the ripple effect that it had, I mean, it's going to be felt forever. I hate to sound like the kid from The Sandlot, forever.
Forever.
But for the foreseeable future, it had a major impact, and I want to know the truth about what the fuck happened that day.
If I had to pick one other one, and I don't know why this one's been kind of like in the back of my mind recently. I don't know if I caught another show or caught another clip of it, but I've always been interested in it. It's around Antarctica and Operation Highjump that happened in the late 40s, where we had sent Admiral Byrd down there to basically check the place out. All different stories about what actually happened. Some stories and some suspicion about a journal, which has been debunked, not debunked, partly true, maybe not true at all. You've heard a little bit about everything. Effectively, the result of that is this Antarctic treaty where you can only go there with permission from one of the many governments around the world that have signed this treaty. And even when you go there, it's at a very small location that you can go. Yeah. And you can't disturb anything else. And I mean, Antarctica is bigger than like Europe, right? It's massive, bigger than Europe and Asia, I think even. It's massive place. And you've got this small little footprint that you can go, which is smaller than the smallest U.S. state. It's a large city basically,
Right.
that you can go and actually see at any given point. Of course, chaperoned. But I'd be curious to know maybe why that was all shut down. What was going on there? Did we find anything there? And I think that ties back into maybe some of the World War II stuff too.
Mm-hmm.
There's been speculation about, did Hitler really die? Because the Russians kind of lied about that. No, it's more of a Russian thing there, but
Right.
we took in a lot of their
Yeah, but
scientists. Well,
we
maybe
would-
what happened with that
We
too.
would know. We would know.
Presumably,
Yeah.
Presumably, yes.
I don't want to knock you off course.
Maybe
here.
not definitively,
Right.
but
I don't want to knock you off course here. I am of the look. The U.S. government is the most powerful government that has ever existed on the face of the planet. We're the most powerful nation.
Mm-hmm.
And look, I know we kind of shit on our own government a lot. I mean, listen, there's no other time I'd rather live in. There's no other place I'd rather live. Right? We're very lucky. Having said that, I truly believe, and when I say the government, I don't fucking mean everybody, but I think that there are certain factions of the government our government, that can find out and that probably do already know everything about anything that they've ever wanted to know about, because they just are that powerful. We have more resources, we have more money, we have more manpower than anybody. It's inconceivable. So I really truly believe that someone in the U.S. government knows everything there is to know about anything you've ever wanted to know.
or most of it, or has access to it.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And to that point, I think there is something to be said about keeping things for the American people. And I understand that people feel like they can all take it. We know that's not the case. I mean, go in daily life, right? Like, try to have a civil conversation with just random people. Some people are just shot, and no matter how much evidence or proof or reason you give a person, sometimes they just don't want to believe. They just don't care. They don't want to believe, and they're stuck in their ways. Like you had alluded to it a little bit before, is sometimes the reason people do this stuff is because they do not want to admit that, like, they were fooled. They had the wool pulled over their eyes. They don't think they could ever have been tricked on anything, and they are. And people have a lack of being able to address that, lack of humility to a degree. I do believe that what those people that you're referencing that maybe do have access to all this stuff are probably doing the right thing. It should not all be out there. Doesn't change the fact that I'd love to know. It doesn't change the fact that I think some of this stuff should be publicized. Maybe not all of it, but I think the general overview should be made accessible. And again, it doesn't have to be widely publicized out there, but maybe just make it out there. Maybe make it accessible for the people that want to learn about it to go and get access to that. Even if that's saying, Tim, you know what? You got to get a security clearance to come read this stuff. And you don't have to, spend all these decades in government and go through all these different hoops to get there. You just have to go through these maybe smaller steps to get there. So we know that you're not a complete lunatic.
Right.
Yeah, man. It'd be interesting to find out. I often wonder if there's not like like we just found out, I guess maybe not even found out. What is that company? Oh God.
I don't know. What do they do?
So, I mean, it's been publicized in the news now. They're basically the people that manage like federal pensions. And there's this like underground city dug into a mountain where they have just these giant, basically a warehouse, but it's like a massive like city area where they have all these documentations there. I want to say it's
Is it in Arkansas?
Blackstone or something.
You're not talking about Black Rock.
No, it's not Black Rock. No. Oh gosh, it was all over social media earlier today. Why
I don't know how I missed that.
What it is? Gosh. In any case, we were talking about it because all the management of like pensions and stuff happens in files, like they're paper files,
Right.
manila folders, in this like vast, like built into like the side of a mountain warehouse. It was really absurd. And it was a company that like, I mean, the name sounds so far, I've heard it a million times before. I wish I could pull it up again here quickly. I'll never find it now while we're live, but it's fascinating to me because there's clearly a lot more going on than what that is.
Sure.
I don't doubt. I mean, we know for certain that there's other like military grade bases that are carved into the side of mountains and whatnot, right? And I don't doubt for a second that we have one that maybe has just like rows and rows and rows of like all this shit. And there's probably like a historian there that has like 10 to it.
Yeah.
And he's probably just sitting on his ass, like reading all this stuff, like going nutty, like wishing he could tell somebody else, like opening up this podcast. Oh, here we go. Elon Musk says a maximum amount of people who can retire from the federal government a month is 10,000 because paperwork is done manually at an old limestone mine in Pennsylvania.
Oh, very
the
close.
mine is Iron Mountain. That's the name of the place, Iron Mountain. And I could have sworn there was a printing company named Iron Mountain in New York City.
Oh, there is. Oh, Jesus Christ! There's a shredding company, a company.
Yes.
Yes, and so
I wonder if it's the same place.
yeah. So what you did? They maybe it's not called Iron Mountain, but it's very similarly named. We sound like fucking idiots, by the way. We can't name companies, but there's a company that'll pick up your secure documents and go and shred them for you. And I'm pretty sure
Right.
it's called Iron Mountain.
Check this out.
Uh-huh.
Look, 330,000 square foot data center,
Jesus Christ.
200 feet deep, and a 35-acre underground reservoir to create a cooling system. Look at this.
That's
And
crazy.
I'm going to zoom up
super
here.
high security.
I'm going to mute that. I don't want that actually going. I'm going to play back speed here. We'll double it up so you can see it. Look at this thing. You're driving in. You're taking like this is a city that is in Pennsylvania that is managing your documents by paper.
That's crazy.
And this is for all your pension retirements, right? So if this is here, right, and this is solely to process pension payments, that's literally what it says, right?
Yeah.
Federal government who can retire from the federal government. Yes, it's pensions. This is a facility underground largely.
They're making good use
mean,
of old
come on.
space.
Yes, but what does that tell you about what else could possibly be out
Oh,
there?
of course.
Right? So that's what I'm sort of getting at is like, is there some sort of like crazy ass archive out there where you can find all this stuff and you just got some guy that his job is to tend to? I mean, I'd go nuts. I'd be reading the hell out of it. You could take away my computer. I'll be entertained for the rest of my life reading this stuff.
By the way, it is called
Fascinating.
the shredding company is called Iron Mountain. What are the odds of that?
Dude,
What
I'm
are
telling
the
you,
odds
there's
of
a
that?
printing
That's
company
pretty
called
funny.
Iron Mountain as well. I recognize that logo because I'm almost positive they used to print the journals
They might have.
for a company I used to work for. Iron Mountain Printing. Oh, this is definitely this is document scanning, secure shredding. Yep, New Jersey. There it is. It's 100% what it was.
Yep. The companies that I've worked for in the past have used
It
them.
was in North Jersey.
Yep.
Yeah, wild.
When did, kind of switching gears
There you
a
go.
tiny bit here, when did your distrust in the government begin? Can you think of a time or a certain scenario?
That's a bold question.
I ask because I know exactly when mine came about.
I don't know. I don't know that it was. I don't know that I've ever had full distrust. I'd say,
Or just speculate.
My
that-
lack,
right. Got it.
Yeah. My lack of confidence in the government probably came about 4 or 5 years ago
Mm-hmm.
when I really felt like I just don't think these people are here to help us at all.
Sure. I would agree with that.
A confluence of events, not one particular event specifically, but there was a lot of, and none of them which I want to bring up on this episode because I don't want this one to get knocked out. But
Listen, we're
I think it
we're
was-
already on the cusp. We talked about the health stuff earlier, so strike number 3 could be coming soon.
yeah, well, it depends. It's the right words,
Yeah.
the right
Yeah.
collection of words. Yeah, so I would say before. I mean, there's always, even with like the JFK stuff, like growing up, always been into conspiracy theories. It's like what I said to you before is even if you told me that the government did it, right, confirmed, which is what I've assumed that they've had a hand in all this time.
Sure.
It doesn't change anything for me. Like it's so out in the past that it's like you become disconnected from it. And so it doesn't really matter to me. The 9/11 stuff was more recent for me, like that. And again, like that one, like, does it matter to me? I don't know.
Yeah.
I'd like to think the answer is probably not. I'd like to think the answer is yes, but I think the answer is probably not because there's always a reason for something, right? And I'm a very analytical thinker. And
Well, it's not going to change your
sometimes-
life, right? Your day-to-day life isn't
Well,
going to change.
Maybe
For the
it
most
does.
part.
You never know. The way I look at it is like sometimes you do things for the greater good. As screwed up as that is to say, especially when there's lives on the line.
Right.
Sometimes things are done for the greater good. What was the greater good? Somebody had to make that decision. I don't think that decision was made lightly. What was the reason? And that, for me, answers a lot of things. If it was politically motivated or money motivated, that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. But if it is motivated to protect people for the greater good, I'm not forgiving it, but I can forget about it. I can distance myself, disconnect myself from it, and move on. But I'd say about, maybe 5 years ago or so, 4 to 6 in that range, I started to feel like just everything seems like it's out to get you. No matter what you do that's good, you're never rewarded. And it seems like they only reward when you do things bad. And that's an unfortunate fact.
I would agree with that.
You asked that question, so I assume you have an answer yourself.
I do. So for me, I'm much, much younger. And it was when I first started watching and or listening to the comedy of one Mr. George Carlin, who, in my opinion, was the greatest comedian to ever live. And George Carlin was a lot of his material, especially as he got older, and he had a lot of run-ins with the law early, and not because of his comedy, right? Because things were, heavily censored back in the day. I'm talking like the early 70s. But especially as he got older in life, older in his career, he spoke out against the government, against corruption, and really just a lot of his specials, a lot of his bits were just about how this whole ball of wax is just, it's a big lie, it's all bullshit. So from an early age, probably, I mean, I became a George Carlin fan at probably like 11, 12 years old. I was a young kid. And at that time, I didn't really understand what he was talking about, but the overarching theme was the government is lying to you. And I didn't really truly know why. I didn't get it at that point in time. But one thing that I did understand was that comedians were very, very smart, right? Because to come up with a joke, you can't be a fucking idiot. You got to be a smart, witty person. You have to be an intelligent person to write jokes, especially jokes that people are going to laugh at and then become a world-renowned comedian. So I remember thinking to myself back then, okay, I don't necessarily understand what he's talking about, but he's a really funny guy, which means he must be a really smart guy, and there has to be some truth to what he's talking about. And for me, that's kind of what kicked off everything. That's where it was ingrained in me, and the government's lying to you. You're being fed bullshit. Yeah. I mean, one of his great lines was, this country has been bought, and it's not a funny line, but the country's been bought and sold for a long time ago, and there ain't nothing you or I could do about it. And I'm probably butchering that. Right. He didn't say that verbatim. You probably said it much more eloquently. But that was the theme of what he was saying, and that stuck with me to this day. I've probably only watched that special one or two times, but that quote has always stuck with me. It just resonates with me, And so, for me, that's kind of where my journey began in terms of, not necessarily conspiracy, just distrust of the government.
Distrust, yeah.
And granted, there's been a lot of things that have happened since then. Since I'm 12 years old, I'm almost 40 now. There's been a lot of things that have occurred that make me go, George was right. In fact, in some of our group chats, sometimes I'll just send a clip of George Carlin talking, and I'm like, motherfucker had it right 35 years ago, 40 years ago, right?
It's funny when you get to look back on things as a kid that you just didn't really process. You just maybe enjoyed at some point, whether it's comedy, TV show, music, whatever, and the commentary on it at the time. And now you look back as an adult and you're like, oh my God, like, wow, like if I processed this at that time, my perspective would have been different. With the comedy thing, not really relevant to this overall conversation, but worth bringing up is, I started watching The Dark Side of Comedy. It's like a Vice TV show that shows all tragedies. You told me about that. They did one with wrestling and UFC. So they just did one recently on, and I had to look up his name, Greg Giraldo. And what fascinated me the most, and it leans into exactly what you just said, is that this guy went to Harvard Law School, graduated, and was a practicing lawyer, successful one nonetheless, and threw it all away to become a stand-up comedian. And, was very popular at the time and did well. Obviously, his career tapered off. Alcohol abuse, so he wouldn't be on the dark side if he came through it, but ended up dying of an overdose. Nonetheless, it was fascinating to me as I've gone through the series and see how many people were that educated to go to Harvard Law and be a practicing lawyer in New York City. And fuck it, I'm just going to go do comedy instead. Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, dude, like I said, you can't be a moron and write good jokes. Right. They don't go hand in hand. You have to be an intelligent person.
Well, especially when you're making a joke on like a commentary of society, right? And you're trying to explain something or crap on something in a very elegant way, or expose something in a very elegant way. It was just a different appreciation kind of coming through it and seeing some of these people, how they got through. I mean, listen, the task force is here. I've got some degree of faith in APL, Anna Paulina Luna. only because she's been a little bit of a firecracker in there. She has no problem talking about conspiracies.
Firecracker and a smoke show.
In congressional hearing and a smoke. And no problem talking about.
I had to throw it in there at some point, dude.
I knew
it was coming.
I knew it was coming.
Oh my good God!
I mean, hand in hand, a good pun there with the words.
I say it all the time. Thank God my wife doesn't give a shit about this and doesn't watch it because APL, baby.
Well, I had to delete a clip the other day that you were tagged in because it was quite literally you saying that. Thank God my wife doesn't talk about this. I immediately went on the Instagram, deleted it. I'm like, because he's going to get tagged in this and he's going to get his balls busted here. But yeah, I mean, she's been a little bit of a firecracker in Congress. She's outright admitted that she's into conspiracies and she's open to exploring them. At her most recent press conference, she said, I hate to use that term. I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but we've been batting good record lately, and I think we owe it to the American people.
Oh, we certainly have.
Again, I don't think that everything's going to come out. I think enough will come out just to maybe appease us, give us a couple more episodes to talk about. But I'm happy with some of the people that are involved here. It doesn't feel like it's just some stiff, like an Adam Schiff that's been saying he's going to expose UFOs for the last 30 years just to get reelected.
I don't think it's a farce, though. Like I don't take it as if though this task force is a facade, right? And just being put up as let's just appease the American people. I do genuinely.
Hard to say.
I in my heart of hearts believe that they do genuinely want to give us the truth and disclose information. I just don't know how much of that's actually going to happen because I don't think it's fully under their control.
I think there are some people right now that are serving in government that would be of that vein, like you mentioned. And I think given the rapid rate in which Trump is coming in and just doing things, I think if there's ever a time for something like this to happen, the time is now. And I don't think this time is going to be very long. I think by this time next year, really November, when November hits, a lot can change in that next election and he loses a lot of majority in either the House or the Senate. Maybe things aren't as easy to pass through. But while he's basically got the numbers in every facet of government, I think you're going to see people move quick. They're going to move swiftly, and it's the way they should. I'm tired of saying, let's start this committee, and then in 10 years, we're going to release documents. If you're going to do it, come out and do it. And it sounds like we're getting it in the next 30 to 60 days. So hopefully by the time each of you guys see this episode next week, it's only another week or two, and we've got something tangible, and we can do more of these episodes just picking apart these documents live. Or maybe throwing in ChatGPT and asking that to do it for us. But We'll decide that when we get there. Would love to hear what each and every one of you think out there. Leave it in the comments below if you're watching on YouTube. Spotify's got a great new comment section. They just re-released it out there. Rumble, you can also follow us on X, Instagram, Facebook. We are all over the place, ladies and gentlemen. Tim, any parting words for our illustrious audience that stuck around for the whole hour?
Fuck the Eagles. It's finally baseball season, and let's go Mets.
Don't care about baseball, but fuck the Eagles indeed. Again, another great episode. Thank you for all your support. We hope you continue to stick around with us on this journey. We're having a great time doing it. Until next time, raise your glasses. So long, everybody.